I'm Dr. John Izzo. I am a speaker, I am an author, I am a business advisor, and I am a baby boomer. That's right. I am a part of that special generation from 47 to 64 years old who, when we were young, believed for certain that we would make the world a better place than we found it. And I am here today to muse, to ask this question: what will my generation actually be remembered for? What will our legacy be? Now, I have to tell you that that's a question that I have been asking for a very long time. When I went to university to study journalism, September of 1975, in my first month of university, I wrote an opinion piece in the university newspaper called Generation Gap. And in it, I mused and asked myself this question: many years from now, what will my generation wind up being known for? And in my 17-year-old pious, prosaic, self-righteous prose, I suggested that if we weren't careful, my generation would wind up being known as the generation who focused on materialistic things, who focused on themselves, and let all the big issues of our generation, war, poverty, and the environment, grow. Now, I want to ask my generation 37 years later, what have we actually accomplished? You see, I believe we live in one of the most critical windows in human history. Now, I know that sounds like hyperbole, but I believe we live in a time when in the next 10 to 20 years, the decisions that we make will mean that my generation especially will either be the most cursed generation in human history or one of the most praised. I think Carl Sagan, the great astronomer and philosopher, put it best in 1999 before he died, when they asked him this question: are you optimistic about the future of human evolution? What a great question. And I love how Carl Sagan answered it. He said, look, if you could project me 50 years out and we had neither blown ourselves up or destroyed the environment beyond repair, he said, I'm very optimistic about the future of human evolution. But he said, but we're in this critical window of time, and if we don't make the right decisions in the next 30 or 40 years, he said, who knows what will happen? And after 37 years, 45 years of my generation being in charge, let's take a look at what's actually happening. Let's admit it's not working. Now, I don't want to bore you with the brutal facts, but let's lay some things on the line. First of all, in every single metric, the environment is deteriorating as we speak. The Arctic ice is melting. The Earth is warming a decade or two faster than the computer said that it would. We're extinguishing species 1,000 times faster than the historic average. The coral reefs are dying. There are dead zones in the ocean. And you say, that's great. That's about trees and plants. But what about people? No, I don't mean to be offensive, because I am not at all ashamed about being in this beautiful theater today and having a nice lunch like we did a while ago, but can we face a fact? It is not working. There are 6.5 billion people in the world and growing by about a city the size of Vancouver every 10 days. And it's not working. 1 of every 6 human beings of the 6 billion on the planet live on less than $1 a day. 1 of every 2, almost 3 billion of us, live on less than $1,000 a day and have no access to sanitation or electricity. And by the way, it's all about to get a lot worse. You don't believe me? Think about this. Let's talk about a demographic time bomb that most of us go through our day hardly ever thinking about. Here's the demographic time bomb: 52%. That's the percentage of Earth's 6.5 billion people who are under the age of 30 years old. And guess where the vast majority of them live? In the developing world. And over the next 10 to 20 years, rightly so, they will want what you and I have in this room. They will want a car, they will want technology, they will want a house, they will want to move from a starch to a protein diet. And as they do it, every single problem that we have right now in the world will get worse. And by the way, those people under 30, they will also have children, and that's why by 2050 there will be, hold your breath, 10 billion of us, or 53% more people than there are right now. And by the way, 80% of the world already lives in societies where the gap between the rich and the poor is growing. Now, enough of the depressing news, but here's the important question: which generation is most responsible for and most able to do something about this problem? And by the way, here's the really nice news for people like me. This is an area where young people and old farts like me happen to agree. You see, when you ask teenagers who are the people most responsible to solve this problem and most able to, 80% of them say young people. We are going to go out and change the world. Only 1 in 5 of them say that people my age are most responsible and most able to solve this problem. And I would love to thank those teenagers for letting us off the hook. But you know what? We are already way off the hook. In that same survey, when they asked people my age, 45 to 65, which generation is most responsible and most able to fix this problem, guess what we said? Only 15% of us, or only 1 in 6 said us. 85% of us said not us, someone else. And when I read this, I thought, this is unbelievable. This is insane. This is incredible. How can the generation that holds 80% of the wealth in the world, how can the generation that runs almost every major corporation in the world, that has the most political muscle in every developed democracy in the world, how can the generation that is going to be the healthiest, longest lived, most educated, and wealthiest older generation in human history actually believe that we're not the ones? And so I started thinking to myself, who could be our mentors in stepping up? And I thought of an unlikely source. I started thinking about our parents. Now, baby boomers, let's admit, we made fun of our parents. Well, let's be honest. We still make fun of our parents. Sorry, Mom, she's in the room. We do. You dress a little funny. You have old-fashioned values about money. We made fun of you, but here's the truth. History has already decided what the baby boomers' parents' generation is going to be known for. You see, this is the generation that lived through the Great Depression and not only endured it, but built the giant safety nets in the developed world that pretty much kept us from having another depression a couple of years ago. This is the generation that when they were only in their late teens and early 20s, totalitarianism started to spread all over the world, in Asia and in Europe. And millions of young people took the first foreign trip of their life at 17 and 18 and 20 and 25 years old, and left their innocence, their youth, and their blood, and often their lives on foreign shores. And back home, men and women bought war bonds and rationed gas, all, for the most part, to help people they would never meet. And that's why Tom Brokaw actually named that generation the greatest generation. And it got me to thinking, if they named my generation right now, what would they name us? And I racked my brain, and finally I think I figured it out. They're going to call us the luckiest generation. They're going to say they're the generation that lived after the bad shit happened and before the next bad shit happened. In fact, I got a better name. They're going to call us the lucky suckers. We were the luckiest generation in the developed world in human history, lived in the most stable, peaceful, wealthiest societies in human history, and right before we left in 30 years, we sucked the last breath of air out of the room, and then we left. And I asked myself the question, is that what I want my generation to be known for? You see, here's what I think. I think now is the moment for my generation to step up. I think now is the moment for my generation to decide to use our education, our wealth, our time, our encore careers to tackle the biggest problem that humanity has ever faced. It's time for my generation to use our political muscle. I mean, think about how we're using it now. In the United States right now, there's a presidential debate going on, and the issue of sustainability and reducing the gap between poverty, the two issues that Carl Sagan talked about, are not even on the table. And I'll tell you why they're not on the table. Because baby boomers who have the most political muscle and the most political will are in the kitchen having Chianti and Cabernet, talking about Social Security, talking about Medicare, while in the basement there's a herd of elephants under 30. They're fornicating and creating other herds of elephants. And we're not doing a damn thing about it. You see, I believe we need a veritable gray corps of wise elders. We need an entire generation of people my age to decide to use our encore careers, to create regenerative technologies, to use our time and our political muscle to make sure these conversations come into the room, to do the equivalent of sacrificing like our parents did for something greater than ourselves. And you might ask yourself, well, why in the world would my generation do that? I mean, this is the time when you're supposed to relax and start taking it easy, and I'll tell you why. Because we're moving into what Erik Erikson, the great psychologist, called the generativity stage of life. That's after about 50 years old, you begin to ask the question, you begin to realize, someday I'm going to die. You know, we baby boomers, Botox, it's working, thank you, but we're going to die. We're moving into what I call the what's it all about Alfie stage. And if you're too young to have any idea what I mean, Google it when you get home. You baby boomers know what that means. It's that time of life when you begin to ask, 20 or 30 years from now when I'm looking back on my life, why will it have mattered that I was here? Now, you know, my stepfather was one of those people in the greatest generation. When he was only 20 years old, he volunteered to take the only foreign trip he would ever take of his life and stormed the beaches of Normandy on the second day that they stormed those beaches. For 3.5 years, he fought until they came to the border of Germany, and after his second time that he was wounded, they sent him home. And the interesting thing is that, like so many people in that generation, he almost never talked about it. And yet once a week or once every other week, he would don that old army jacket. And he would go down to the VFW hall on Friday night and hang out with those old veterans. And I have to be honest, I never knew why. But I think I know now. I can think it's because all of his life until he died 10 years ago, he carried within him this pride. He carried within him this sense that when his generation had been called, when his time had been asked, he and his generation had stepped up, had gone there and made that choice. And I don't know about you, but when I'm 80 years old, I don't want to be sitting and apologizing for what my generation did. I don't want to be apologizing for the fact that all the time that we were in power, we thought somebody else should solve this problem. I don't want to apologize for the fact that everybody knew it was coming and we did nothing about it. You see, I think this is the moment for my generation. You know what's interesting? For our parents, it happened when they were very young. For us, it's happening just about the time we're supposed to sign up for the jumpsuit. You see, this is our moment. We will either be known as the luckiest generation, the lucky suckers, or we will be known as the wisest generation who chose before they died to solve the biggest problem humanity ever faced. We will either be known as a generation that thought they were special or a generation that wound up being special. We will either be known as a generation who took our oldest years and said, sign me up, give me the problem, let me solve it. Or we'll be known as a generation forever one big apology in human history. And all we were able to say is, we're sorry. So here's my advice. If you're not a baby boomer in this room, I want you to give and send this video to every single baby boomer, you know, your parents, your aunts, your mentors, and I want you to say to them, we can't have you check out. We need you. Sign up. This is your problem. Help us fix it. And if you're a baby boomer in this room, I have one simple thing to say to you. 37 years ago, I penned this generation gap. And what I want to say to my baby boomer friends, put away the cruise tickets. There's work to be done. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.